Awesome. Well, welcome to another episode of Advertising Alpha. Today we have Zach Murray, who's the founder of Foreplay. And Foreplay is just an awesome tool that helps you save ads from competitors or anything else in the market, build briefs, and produce high converting ads at scale without really compromising on the quality of your ad. So it's such an awesome tool. A ton of people love it in this direct to consumer e-com space. So really pumped to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Awesome. Yeah. So first question for you is, what's your hot take on generative AI, especially in this direct to consumer performance advertising space with performance creative, et cetera? I've seen a lot of stuff on LinkedIn and Twitter about how people are cutting creative teams and there's all these hacks, but like, what do you think about all this? And what's your hottest take on this?
I mean, I think the hottest take that I have is that it's going to enable like the top, certain percentage of creatives and probably eliminate a lot of the labor side of creative. I think that's kind of just what you see across any sort of massive shift here. The biggest thing that I think will not come true is that there'll be like an end-to-end solution for, ad creative, in Gen AI. I think if you look at even just one of my favorite quotes, like the medium is the message. And it's like, whatever you're trying to actually create, there's going to be like a point solution for that. And so I don't think that there's ever going to be a tool that's like, we just make the best Facebook ads. I think there'll be a lot of tools that make the best image ads, make the best video ads in very specific formats, very specific styles. I think we'll see an evolution of new styles come out. But I think what we're going to see is that, people are kind of extending their tentacles into a bunch of different products in the same way that you would see them extend their arms into a bunch of different products within the Adobe suite, depending on what they wanted to create. And so I think that's probably my hottest take. And the biggest piece is that I don't think, creative teams go to zero at all. If anything, I think when your creative efficiency goes up and you can scale, you can also scale teams and scale output. So at the end of the day, none of us are trying to build flat businesses, right? We're trying to grow businesses. And so I think you can maybe get to certain scale with less people. But at the end of the day, if we can grow the business faster, you can also grow team.
Yeah, and I'm curious to your thought on this or your kind of pushback maybe, but my idea is agencies are going to lean into this model where it's you have really good creative strategists who are good critical thinkers that know how to leverage these tools really well. And there's just going to be significantly less kind of like sweatshop based creative production. And I know it sounds bad, but it's just there's not going to be too much of that. You can do a lot of that with generative AI today. And I think it's just the people who will win are people who just do a better job understanding how to leverage these tools.
I think so. And I think what we might also see is like the resurgence of like art direction as, more of a sort of, steadfast role on creative teams. I think at the end of the day, figuring out how to leverage these tools and then have also really great guardrails that, align with, brand value, design quality and things like that. I think before you probably wouldn't have seen, mid-sized D2C brands have, potentially an art direction role. But if you eliminate all that labor, I do think that potentially an art direction role or a creative director role, you might see that in smaller brands because there's not as much resource going at the execution, like I see of the creative level.
Yeah. Yeah, it totally makes sense. What about this idea too around generative AI is just making creative significantly more it just created so much more noise and kind of fluff in the creative space where a lot of generative AI just kind of looks the same and it's not that unique or authentic. And so I just feel like people are being lazy, especially I'll just use a good example. Like let's say LinkedIn posts, right? Everyone can now just drop in a couple prompts in ChatGPT and then get a ton of content for the week, what they want to have in their LinkedIn post. But that content now looks all the same. Like LinkedIn is just kind of like this noise of like the same content from all these different people because it's all written by ChatGPT. Do you think that will start to happen? Or I think this has already kind of happened in this space with creative, but do you think it will get worse?
I think you see this like trends die out, right? And I mean that at the end of the day, that's what they do. And so I think if anything, what it does is it enables the opportunity for more trends to get their foothold like a lot faster, but potentially burn out faster. I mean, at the end of the day, I would say that if you were to say like the golden age of UGC was like 2021, 2022, all of that seemed like it was copy paste and, it became fluff. But now you see UGC creators actually turning into more of like actual creators. They're not creating stuff that feels like user generated content. They're creating art pieces and they're they're actually telling like really compelling stories in like unique and interesting ways. And so I generally have a belief that creativity is maximalist. And I think that the market always usually favors creativity. And so I think what you see is like, yeah, you'll see trends die out or you'll see trends become saturated. But the thing that when a trend dies out is the thing that it's creating is space for something new. And so I think that's what kind of goes back to what I was saying about art directors as well. The reason why, potentially all generative AI ads look kind of like similar, or they have the same taste or the same texture to them, is because they're, being utilized by people who are putting the minimum amount of effort into them. But if you look at some of the best AI creators, like I follow some of them on Instagram, and they create stuff that's incredible that you would never even like believe would be AI. And you look at it and you wonder how I could never even get something out of that, or I could never get something of that quality out of, Midjourney or whatever I'm using. And so, I do think that it's just gonna, it raises the baseline to whatever the standard is, whatever the status quo is, but the stuff that stands above the status quo will always stand above the status quo.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's I don't know what's a good way to say this. It's almost like GarageBand for everyone had access to GarageBand, right? And it lowered the barrier to entry for people to make music, right? However, that didn't necessarily empower much more people. I think in any space where there's creativity, like ads, like music, it's extreme power law distributions. And the people that have access to these tools actually become radically better, where it just, to your point, it kind of just raises the bar for everyone else. But that's also like low barrier to entry and just kind of the status quo again, if that makes sense.
100%. And I mean, at the end of the day, winners win. So
Yeah.
I do like, although AI is now a thing that's going to enable a bunch of people, I think if you took that same person and you rolled back the time, like a time machine to 10 years ago where they didn't have access to AI tools, I think those people would inherently still probably be the most creative. Like, would their output not be as great? Potentially, but I do think that, generally it's as an individual, it's what do you want to create, or as an organization, and like how far do you want to push it outside of like what feels comfortable. And so I just think that that's something that's just going to continue, into eternity. I was thinking a few weeks ago, I don't have as much time to spend on like a Gen AI stuff as I wish I did. And I think back, when I was like 18, 19, I was really into animation and things like that. And I would just do a bunch of really cool like projects for fun. And I was thinking like, wow, like I would give all of the money in the world to be 19 right now and like not have any responsibility and be able to like go down a rabbit hole for 14 days because I feel like I could create something incredible. As of right now, like the incentives aren't aligned in my life to do that. But I do look at sort of like young, curious, creative people and be like, wow, like you're going to be able to create some really amazing stuff.
Yep. No, 100%. I can't remember his name. This guy just recently started following on Twitter. He's just quick turning all these different AI based, projects. And it's funny because they're all kind of these like different, like they're set up on some type of subscription basis. And like in aggregate, it's like 400K MRR that he's set up. And it's like 8 different companies. And he's listed all the companies that he's launched, and it's like 200, and he's hit on like 8. And it's just like really cool because he can build these so fast and launch them. It's just wild. I mean, it's super empowering. But yeah, to your point, it's kind of hard because you just don't have the bandwidth now, or like, kind of mental space to go focus on that. Just, if you're running something like Foreplay. So
yeah, or even just like, I'm even thinking from like an art perspective, like I just think like, how cool would it be to be like a 19-year-old person right now who's like, I always talk about this. So I kind of, my personal brain sits between like two contrasting, like one, I like really love business. I like scaling companies, but I'm also like, at my core, like primal self, I'm incredibly creative, and I'm kind of an artist. And when I like think about like the artist side of my brain, it's actually just like a really horrific way to live life. Because there's this thing that happens when you're a creative person where your taste is always like 10 or 20% greater than what you can execute on at that time. And so at any point in time you're working on a project, and your taste is X, you're only be able to like execute on Y. And then by the time you finish that project, you might be able to, make something as good as what your taste is, but previously, but your taste has now moved. And so it's like this consistent sort of thing of just like chasing the dragon. And what I wonder now is because you can, to become an expert at After Effects or an expert at like photo retouching, it would take like 6 or 12 months or 2 years. Now that's like shortening so fast because the technology is moving so fast and you can adapt to it so fast. it's like, those creative people, their cycles are going to be so much faster, which I think is just like really cool because I think people's just taste can evolve that much faster.
Yeah, that's super interesting. It's funny, actually. So I'm not very artistic at all, but I was kind of introduced to that same concept that you're describing with a buddy of mine that works in the music space, and he was saying the same thing. It's like what you kind of have in your head or what you're trying to do and how you can actually apply it is and see like the actual result is so much faster now with AI, and it's absurd. It's like crazy to see, and I mean, it is pretty. I mean, it's awesome to see that. It's yeah, it's just a wild concept because that time it takes to create something based on whatever you're kind of visualizing or you have in your head. I mean, it's radically shorter. So, that's awesome. Well, I guess, the other question I had for you is, obviously at Foreplay, you get to see a lot. Everyone can in terms of access to the platform, but I know, you work with a lot of brands and agencies. What do you see as the kind of cutting edge or, best strategies heading into 2025?
So I think everyone's saying the same thing right now, which is creative volume is kind of the focus. I was talking to a friend last night, and he was asking me like, oh, like what should our volume be? Like I'm seeing this brand do this brand do that, but we're feeling that there's some quality issues if we're trying to scale, volume too fast. But what I've seen amongst the brands that are scaling creative volume really, really well is that while not compromising quality, they're essentially testing volume on still images. And so you're having a limited number of variables. And then the main thing that they're testing from like the still image perspective is usually like angle, persona, and messaging. And then, you have like single image with a bunch of different headlines, a bunch of different messaging or demonstration moments of the product, whatever it is. And then so that's the initial creative test. Even if those single images don't hit, let's just call your ROAS benchmark or whatever you want to like hit as your target. You're still cherry picking out the best ads from that cohort of image ads and then converting them into video or converting them into carousel and like doubling down on them. And so I think what you're seeing is a bifurcation of testing at scale. It's not we need to test incredible videos at scale consistently because if I'm being honest, like a lot of times that's like there's actually too many variables being tested. You can't actually get to consensus on it. And so the number one trend that I'm seeing is like, yes, volume, but the really repeatable, actionable way of doing it is get your volume in terms of messaging and angles on image, and then cherry pick a video from there. And that's kind of, what I'm seeing. And I think it's like from first principles, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's actually great to hear that because that kind of validates what we're doing in our process around creative testing. Because my kind of philosophy now going into this was I almost like creative testing to me is like the game Battleship. And it's like the way I look at it is like you're kind of looking at your target personas or customers, and they kind of sit on some chart, and you can better identify and exploit. And this sounds bad, but I'm just saying in terms of like an explore versus exploit like situation where it's like you can explore a lot at the beginning where it's like, hey, you have all these like, let's say behavioral psychology principles you run on like static ads, as well as like different kind of like background images, different hooks, and you create a matrix around it and you just go apply that matrix to, your audience. Meta will go figure out within that the pockets of people that are going to resonate best with those ads, and you'll start getting hits. Like, all right, well, this psychological principle with this type of imagery and these types of hooks generally work well. Okay, now let's go iterate off of that. And when you do that, yeah, you go switch into different formats, UGC, et cetera. But those kind of core principles are, resonate best with whatever your target audience is. And so the best way of doing that at scale is just cheap static image ads, right? And you just dump them out there, but you have to have a framework for it. Because if you're doing it at random, it's a little bit more difficult. And I think if you have a good framework that covers enough of the kind of basic principles around like what you're testing for in advertising, like behavioral psychology, you are going to know for sure like what's going to work over the long term and what's worth like iterating off of.
For sure. Yeah, I 100% agree.
Yeah. And I think too, with static ads is great because, I've been talking about, but the cost to produce a static ad has gone almost to zero. So it's like so much easier to just get that quickly out there and test it at scale. So awesome. Is there anything else that you're seeing as like a big trend right now as we head into 2025?
I mean, I think if I were to make a prediction, and I've been seeing this amongst a couple of companies, there's that. What's funny is the two companies I've been seeing it are actually in the same space. One being Brick, so like the little square that turns your phone off, and the other one being Opal. They're doing what I would consider like video essays. about the problem. I think you can, you know, you can draw similarities to like some old VSL type direct response stuff, but they're doing it in like a very artistic way. And so I think, and then I think if you also look at, let's just say what's happening with organic reels right now, production quality of, at least in my feed of organic reels and the stuff that's getting served to me isn't, the girl in her bedroom doing a get ready with me. Even if she is doing a get ready with me or whatever it is that's being served to me, it's, the storytelling, the hooks, the transitions, the way that they're capturing attention, mid-roll on the reel is at a level of creativity that I don't think we saw over the last 24 months. And so I think, a very standard, flow of history has been what works trending on organic eventually gets put into paid and then exploited. And so I think what you're going to see is a lot more creator focused individual ads, higher production quality rather than UGC, people who are like actual storytellers and are willing to like take, that 9:16 video and turn it into something that's like incredibly compelling and not trying to feel like it's organic. Because I almost feel like, I think we saw this with TikTok as well. It was like people, overindulged on this idea of being like so transparent. And then at the end of the day, it's like, well, if everybody's transparent and has, every door in their house open to you, then that opens a gap for mystery and storytelling and tension and intrigue. And so I think that's the trend that I think we're going to see in 2025 is just higher level of storytelling and higher level production on, let's call it creator assets, not necessarily UGC style.
Yep. Yeah, it makes sense. Well, it's funny. I forget the term, but there's some term flying around on LinkedIn where it's like that, higher production quality UGC content that a lot of people are using. Makes a lot of sense. Awesome. Well, last question for you. I know you're working on some stuff at Foreplay, and you're I think about to launch a new product or feature. But I was wondering if you wanted to talk about that a little bit and also explain a little bit as to like why you're launching now.
Yeah. So, I mean, we have a new product called Lens. To summarize it, it's, performance creative reporting through a creative lens. Why now is, I think the biggest question that I've been like battling with over like the last 3 years of building Foreplay. I think everybody else that's built creative reporting tools from first principles, it makes sense, but it misses the mark by, I think, agree of around 25%. I think at the end of the day, the only reason for a creative reporting tool is to build something that a graphic designer or a video editor or a strategist actually wants to use, not they have to use it. And I think that we knocked it out of the park with that specifically. It's honestly just an incredibly delightful product to use. You don't need a CSM to onboard. You don't need to watch a bunch of tutorials. I think any human that is apt with software is going to be able to pull a lot of insights, whether you're an agency to communicate, what you're working on with clients. If you're a strategist, we have a bunch of agent workflows built directly inside of it. That's, kind of doing the first 50% of your job. I think one of the biggest, what is the core principle of Foreplay? And the entire idea is that like the difference between doing work when you're inspired versus not is an incredibly different feeling, and it moves at an incredible velocity, right? Everybody knows the feeling of, you're kind of sitting around your house and then the button, you connect the dots in your head and you sit down your computer and the thing that was taking you 3 days is like done in 30 minutes. And I think we did that incredibly well, which is like visual inspiration and giving people inspiration for content. I think with Lens and the analytics tool, we're doing that with iteration and what to do next with the ads that you're running. And so I think it completely aligns with our core principles of how do we spark inspiration so that you can do a lot more work inside a flow state. And yeah, I truly believe that like human inspiration and feeling stoked, or just like at least having a direction that you're confident in going down, the hours you put in on the other side of that are they just yield a lot more than the hours you put on before you have that direction. And so I'm incredibly excited about it. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I guess just one quick question. And then also too, I mean, I'm excited to hear about this just quickly is because one kind of challenge we've had, we use motion, right? And there's just some kind of disconnect, right? And a lot of times we have to train creative strategists on motion. And then, our creative strategists we've had, they do know like kind of performance metrics well, but there's a decent amount of training we still have to do. And then there's a lot of alignment between them and the media buyers and exactly what's going on in the account. I guess, I mean, this sounds like this gives a lot, it empowers these creative strategists a lot more and it allows them to kind of move faster and develop much better insights. But I was wondering too, it's like maybe you could explain a little bit how this is better or different from motion and why this would be more helpful basically.
Yeah. I mean, I'll start off with like the very obvious one, and it's that our product Lens, there's no ad spend tax. And so I don't care if you're spending $1 million a month. I don't care if you're spending $100,000 a month. Bringing in your Facebook data.
Agency. Yeah.
Because you know what it's doing for you as an agency as well is it's like a weird misincentive for like what you're trying to do for your client. And, maybe your client is paying the bill and then you have like a weird conversation with them about like their bill doubling and things like that. So, we're fully axing the ad spend tax when it comes to analytics. The idea that it's more data being processed in is an absolute sham. And at the end of the day, I don't care how much you're spending on Meta. We're going to take the data in Meta, and no matter the size of your team, no matter the amount of money you're spending. I mean, size of your team, yes, we scale with users. We have to scale some way, but it's not going to be attached to your ad spend because that's just a complete misalignment of incentives. The other, down to the products, I think over the long enough time horizon, pricing never matters, product only matters. And I think we have the best sort of like product thinking in this space and like the most delightful products. One, there's not going to be a need to be but a bunch of training for your team when you bring people on. If these people know how to use software generally, they're going to be able to get value out of out of Lens. The other piece is when you sign up, what you're not going to get is you're not going to get a Google sheet telling you how you need to completely rework your naming conventions. The idea that a software company can charge you that much money and then on your onboarding you get sent to a Google sheet is insane. We're building software companies. We're not building SOPs. And then the other piece is, you're going to have the ability to build reports based on naming conventions. But one thing we all know is that, in creative operations, not everything is perfect from day one. And there's going to need to be times when stuff needs to be, when you're going to want to build out reports in a bit more of a flexible fashion, right? Maybe there's a variable inside of your ads that you identified after launching them 3 months later that you didn't put in your naming conventions. You're going to be able to easily just go in, add tags, and build those dynamic tags, on ad hoc without touching, your Facebook data. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff. The really cool thing about building a great product is that I'm lucky enough to just say, you know what, go connect your ad account to both of them and use both of them. And I think it will be like incredibly clear, what people will like using better. Some other just like off the cuff stuff, benchmarking across over 100 different industry segments, over industry AOV and GMV segments. So you'll be able to look at what your CPA looks like across 20,000 other companies from day one. Also like gamification built directly in the platform. The one thing we know is like, yeah, you can figure out what assets you're working, but what is behind those assets? It's people. And if you have underperformers on your team, I mean, we've had conversations like this about identifying underperformers on teams, right?
Yep.
The difference between an agency having someone that's carrying like a heavy ball, and they're dragging the entire team down, being able to identify that sooner than later as an agency owner can be the difference between client performance and client retention. On the other side, I think what you're seeing as well is strategists are starting to be compensated on performance. And so how do we close the gap to make more teams be able to incentivize their teams properly to gamify the experience of shipping more winning ads? Because the difference of having like one new ad hit a month and 6 new ads hit a month is drastically different businesses. And so it's really cool that we're even in an industry that, we can incentivize people in that direction. And it's going to be a lot easier to do that inside of Lens.
God, that's awesome.
I'm really excited about it, dude. It's going to be it's a sick product.
I'm pumped. I can't wait to try it out and have our team try it out. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, all of that sounds incredible, especially on the gamification side, because I think that's super interesting. Also, too, improving your hit rates and just having better ways of doing that. I mean, 100%. Like the difference between one winning ad or six is it's huge. And so yeah, I'm super excited to try it out and have the team roll it out too. So yeah, super pumped. How long have you been working on it?
We're probably like 4 months of intense work right now, and we're in like the final stages. Yeah, honestly, like happy to get on a call with you after this too, and just like show you around. It's
Yeah, yeah.
I'm really really excited about it, and I think people are just gonna really. I think I'm a bit of a software snob, and if something doesn't feel good to use, I hate it, and this feels really good to use. So I'm really excited.
Awesome. Yeah. Plus, it's gonna be like having two great products in one place where it's like, yeah, we can do the kind of spine research, whatever, and then also use this basically to do what Motion does. I mean, at least for us as an agency, it's a no-brainer.
There's also going to be
place.
Yeah, there's also research agents built directly into Lens. So when we have all of your ad data, we have your GMV size, all that kind of stuff, we can actually then tap into, the entire database of advertising that, Foreplay's collected over the last, 3 years of actual advertising that's been saved by actual users. That's another thing that I would just like point out is like all these other kind of copycats of Foreplay. So yeah, they're just scraping the ad libraries in bulk and, getting to millions of ads, but there is a piece to like the human curated ability of our ad library, which is over like 40 million ads now saved by humans. And so you'll be able to, look at an ad inside of your reporting tool and then instantly be able to hop off and see similar ads in discovery from competitors or products that are targeting the same sort of pain problem state, but potentially a different solution, all that kind of stuff. And so I think what's really crazy is, Foreplay was always looked at the place where you go at the beginning stages to get inspiration. I think the new analytics product Lens is going to start to be even the step before the research process because it's going to have so much more context.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, that's awesome. I'm pumped for you and definitely pumped to try this out. I guess, as we kind of wrap up here, is there anything else you want to say about Foreplay or anything else you kind of want to highlight before we wrap things up?
No, I mean, I think, I said my piece about what we have coming. I'm most excited I've ever been about a product we've built. And it's kind of crazy that we're going into like our third year now. It feels like a lot longer, but it also feels just like yesterday that we started. And it's honestly just been really cool to like, I remember when we first created I was mocking up our first website in Figma. I had like a logo bar where I was like, these are the brands I want to get. And we have all of them now from like that first like Figma draft. And so, yeah, it's been cool. We've been able to do up until now. And I'm super excited about the next 24 months.
That's awesome. Yeah, you guys have grown so fast and it's super impressive. Like, especially too, like, yeah, seeing, I always see good things too on socials about Foreplay. So, congrats to all the success and, pumped to check out Lens once it gets rolled out.
Sweet. Thanks.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for joining. And I thought this was an awesome conversation. So really appreciate having you on.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.